Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the One Talk podcast. You have your host, Ryan McCarthy. And today we are joined by Jason Banks. Jason is the co-CEO of TIACS. And TIACS is a free phone and text counselling service offering mental health support to Australia's blue-collar community. And he also does collaboration and work because TIACS is a branch of TradeMutt. And TradeMutt is a clothing brand to create more awareness around mental health. And you've probably seen it out in Australia. Have you seen tradies wearing those fluoro orange or yellow shirts, and they have like cool, colorful patterns all over them as well? That's TradeMutt. So TradeMutt, and he's also the co-CEO of TIACS. And in today's episode, we touch on a lot around just mental health and the journey of mental health. And I'm going to put a disclaimer out there just because we do talk about mental health. We do talk about mental illness. We also touch on suicide as well. In today's episode, we do talk about suicide for a disclaimer. But in today's episode, we just touch on a lot around blue-collar workers being the backbone of society, especially within Australia, the mental health challenges they go through, and the importance of having awareness out there, but also having a service like TIACS out there so that people can get a free phone and text counselling service. So I'm really keen for you all to check out today's episode. In other news, if you could please leave this podcast a rating, it means so much in terms of helping this podcast grow and reaching a larger audience. If you're on YouTube, if you could subscribe, please. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, if you could please leave a rating, it means so much. But without further ado.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all. The marathon continue. Victory lap tonight, though. Victory lap tonight.
Welcome to the One Talk podcast with Ryan McCarthy.
The marathon continues. That's what you would say.
Welcome to the One Talk podcast. Jason Banks, how are you?
I'm doing great, mate. Really good.
Good to hear, man. Thanks for coming on and sharing your message and sharing the work that you're doing through TradeMutt TIACS, but also sharing your journey as well, because I feel like from this episode, we're one, going to bring a lot of awareness to people, but two, we might inspire people to have the courage to speak up, or three, we may give people the resources to share with their family for anyone that in their life that may be struggling or finding challenges. So really keen for today's episode, man.
I've been pumped for this one as well. I think the more that we get the message out there that people aren't alone and everyone's got a story, I think we can really break down a lot of barriers around this space and create an environment within the community where it just has this ripple effect that, you know, somebody starts off with a conversation that might be having a tough time, but then it flows on to their mates and their loved ones, and it just keeps on having this ripple effect out in the community.
Yeah, like we were talking about before the podcast as well, like how strong the ripple effect of word of mouth is for life. Like, because within like the last 20 years, it's quite new that word of mouth has kind of slowed down in the physical sense. But all our information throughout history has been word of mouth as well. So getting the message out in the community, getting people talking, I feel like, you know, it's really important.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a funny world we're in at the moment. We're probably the most connected we've ever been.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're the most disconnected we've ever been, you know, and I think the power of social media is great when it's used in a really good way, but it also can disconnect us from human connection. And I think that's the key for us, definitely the work that we do at TradeMutt and TIACS, which we'll get into, is just creating this connection of human connection. And, you know, I think sometimes we've lost a bit of the art of having a conversation.
Yeah.
Like we're sitting here today, never met before, first time, and we're already kicked off having a conversation. Yeah. And I think some people struggle with that.
That's why I do love podcasting as well, quickly, because it gives you that opportunity to like have an hour or two to actually just connect with no distractions, no phone in your hands. Like touching back on the social media and connector side of things as well. That's one of the great things about TIACS, because you could be sitting at home and do like a text service. Like how good is that? Like 30 years ago, we didn't even have access in like a moment if we're in bed late at night or we're out somewhere with family and we need to, you know, speak with someone quickly over text. Like we actually can access them now. That's like the great thing about social media in the way we can use it to benefit us in life, eh?
Yeah, definitely. I think that whole texting thing is that, you know, we find with our service that, you know, we're a mental health counselling service, that when people are reaching out and they're dialing a number, what do I say when I'm having a bit of a challenging time in my life? I might be going through some rough times and, you know, it could be a relationship breakdown or financial issues. What do I say on the other end of the phone where the text sort of just takes that barrier away where people can feel connected but actually not feel really like they're putting themselves right out there and not knowing what's going to come back.
True, and it gives you like that side of like feeling of confidential as well. Because I know one of the things about opening up, like you don't feel like you want to be quote unquote exposed. I think I'm talking more so from my own past when I first opened up. But then when you have that confidentiality side, it gives you more confidence within yourself to actually start the conversation until you do feel comfortable to make the step into like a physical space.
Yeah, definitely. And we get that a lot where people reach out for the first time to TIACS and they'll start off with a text, you know, but by the first session or the second session, they're going, hey, can we do this via phone now? Because they're feeling comfortable with themselves to share their story and really open up and feel that connection with the counsellor. So, yeah, I think they're definitely, there's the positives around that whole social media and mobile phones. And, you know, as I said, we just got to bring that art of having a conversation. And, you know, when we see some people out there that our mates and our loved ones that may be struggling, to make sure that we really connect with them.
Yeah, 100%, brother. And like, to be able to give some context to the audience here, like, we'd love to hear about, like, what is TradeMutt and what is TIACS?
Yeah, well, really, I've got to put a disclaimer in from the start that we'll be touching on the suicide word through this podcast. So if that triggers anything for anybody, you know, please reach out to the TIACS service or any other services you out there, or just have a chat to one of your mates. But to talk about TIACS, who is a company, the organisation that I work for, I've got to talk about TradeMutt. And you know, TradeMutt was founded in 2018, but the journey really started in 2015 when a couple of young chippies, Dan and Ed, were working together on a building site, a residential building site. Ed was actually Dan's apprentice at the time. Ed decided to become a mature age apprentice, and they met in 2014, but in 2015 they were working together. And unfortunately, Dan got the phone call that no mate wants to receive, or no loved one, to be honest with you, that, you know, his best mate, who was also called Dan, had taken his own life. And you know, when we lose people, a loved one or a mate close to us, there's a lot of grief that comes with that. But you know, when we've been touched by suicide, you know, there's a lot of questions that just don't get answered. There's a lot of questions that, what could I have done differently? There's anger. You know, why did they do that to me or their family? And, you know, Dan and Ed, definitely Dan went through that range of emotions. They were only in their 20s, so, you know, it was a real battle for them to understand this thing called mental health, you know. And I think they often reference things that back in those times, and it's, you know, you were still looking, you know, that's nearly 8 years ago, their vision of mental health and what was being marketed out into the community was, if you drove past a billboard on the side of a bus stop, there's a 45-year-old bloke in a dimly lit room with his hands on his head, clutched over, and that's how mental health was being marketed. Yeah. And for Dan and Ed, it was like, we're going through some challenges, but we don't look like that. We look like every other person that's out there. And, you know, being a couple of chippies, you know, chippies or carpenters out there will think, you know, often say that they're problem solvers.
I used to be a chippy as well.
Well, there you go. There you go. And you probably, you know, that you are problem solvers. You know, you spend a lot of the time going, you know, how are we doing this? And then if something doesn't go quite well, how do we get ourselves around that? And, you know, for Dan and Ed, it was their problem. What they wanted to solve was, how can we get more people talking, and how can we sort of prevent another group of mates or loved ones going through what they went through by losing their best mate, Dan. And so with that, they set out on a bit of a journey. They were working 7 days a week, getting a few cashies out there that there's not so much cash floating around now, but they worked 7 days a week, and they were doing extra jobs on weekends, and they ended up saving up some money to be able to go, okay, how can we get people talking? And their thing was, if we could get people talking through a shirt, it's a simple garment. They were also sick of wearing khaki and blue, which is most tradies wear. So they had this idea about having this funky shirt that's a bit bright, it's a bit loud, maybe to shed a bit of light on this mental health space, but get people talking. And so they came up with these designs, and they pretty much had the idea of launching the shirts. They bought 1,500 work shirts and 2 laptops with their money that they'd saved up.
Big commitment.
Yeah, massive. And they often say, you know, if TradeMutt never took off. They both would have been stuck with 750 shirts each, ranging from an extra small to a 3XL in size, and they would have been stuck with that. But fortunately for us, when they launched in 2018, it took off, and within 5 days they were cash flow positive, and within 3 months they were off the tools.
Wow.
So they often say that they've gone from being tradies and now they're fashion designers for blue collar industry. But the shirts were all designed to start conversations. And they're a bit funky, they're a bit out there, but it's all designed to get turn strangers into mates. And I don't know, I could count every time I wear a full blown TradeMutt shirt, which is my everyday attire, is people will see me and go, mate, what's that shirt about? And I've had blokes that are as stoic as what you could ever see. Put a bloke in front of you and go, he's got stoicism and he's tough and he's burly. Walk past me and go, mate, you wouldn't catch me wearing that. And I go, oh, mate, really? Do you know about it? And then as soon as I start telling the story, by the end of the story, he's jumping online buying a shirt. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. It's the power of that. The power, we call it's the power of a shirt. But when they launched in 2018, as I said, it took off for them, and got people talking. And a few of the key features on the shirts, I'm wearing one of the polo high vis tonight, but on the shirts it's got this is a conversation starter on the back, which is what the shirt is designed to do, is to start conversations. On every shirt, and on this one it's sort of down here, but it's on the left breast pocket of the other shirt, it's a QR code.
Oh, how good.
If you scan that QR code, you get straight through to TIACS. Oh, wow. So, if we're sitting there with a mate at a pub or, at a truck stop or in a farm or anything on a construction site and somebody's struggling, all you've got to do is just basically, and you're wearing one of these shirts, is get them to scan that QR code and they get the number straight through to TIACS. And
great initiative, eh?
It is, yeah, and it gets lots of activations. And then You'll Never Walk Alone is embossed on all the shirts. I think it's on one of the sides here. And, You'll Never Walk Alone is really in honour of Dan, who took his own life. He was a mad Liverpool supporter, so anyone that's a mad Liverpool supporter knows that You'll Never Walk Alone is, what they live by. And, that also lets people know out there in the community that they're not alone, and there is people out there. And I think the shirts have just created a movement. A lot of people probably have seen them out and about now, and, we're getting so many different... we're getting teachers, groundskeepers, even office people are jumping on board with this initiative just to start conversations. And the other bonus is that, 50% of the profits of the shirts get donated back to TIACS. So they're Australia's only social enterprise workwear business. But how TIACS sort of came into this mix was that, 2018 they launched TradeMutt, started the conversations, and then people started reaching out going, where do I go to next?
Yeah, that's it. I have the awareness now. All right, now what? And
I've this shirt might have just started a conversation between you and I, but sometimes there's stuff that we want to talk about, but we might not feel comfortable talking about it with a mate or a loved one. We want that confidential sort of. We want someone to talk about in confidence, or we might have exhausted our support crew. Where do we go to next? And the boys were always had this attitude of, if we can, we must, and they wanted to put 50% of the profits of their shirts into a mental health organisation so that they could make a social impact. But when they started looking around, there was nothing targeted to blue-collar Australians, which is, tradies and truckies and farmers, people living in rural areas that don't have the opportunity to access the services out there. So they came up with this thing that, we're just going to go do it. And they went out and bought a mobile phone and pretty much a mobile phone number, hired a professional on the back of what TradeMutt had donated, and they launched TIACS in 2020. And TIACS is a service for a professional, free and confidential mental health counselling service for tradies, truckies, farmers, any blue collar worker out there, and any of their loved ones. And I think we just cannot forget about the people that are going through a tough time, their loved ones.
People around them.
Yeah, and we often get people reaching out that may have... We only had someone recently that reached out to TIACS, and it was a mother reaching out on behalf of her apprentice son, and really wanted to be able to go, how do I get him the support I need? And by the end of the session, she'd actually booked herself in for some sessions.
Yeah, wow.
And so I think, so TIACS is there. It's a call text service, as you mentioned at the start. a really simple way of connecting. You just reach out to tiacs.org and get all the details there. It's a text call. You'll have a chat with an intake counsellor. The intake counsellor will then do a bit of triage because unfortunately, even though we have people reaching out to probably get a few things off their chest, they might have a bit of head noise. We do manage crisis calls where people are having suicidal ideations, and when I look at that and listen to some of those calls that we get through like that, people are actually still reaching out. That they're showing a lot of bravery and vulnerability to still reach out at that point.
Definitely. Yeah.
And then you get booked into a counsellor, and for anyone that's working in the blue collar industry, we offer up to 8 free counselling sessions with no GP referral required.
How good's that? So just quickly, before you carry on, the point of getting to booking in a GP appointment, if you're in a blue collar job, usually the time frame of getting into a GP is 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. And usually you're working those days, and sometimes it can be tricky getting the day off, or if you don't get paid to have your day off, then it's some people may not be able to afford to take the day off to go to the GP in the first place. So that can be a barrier in the first place. So I think actually being able to go straight to TIACS without needing to go to the GP is a really good access point for people.
Yeah, and our mission is to remove 3 barriers for blue collar Australians and their loved ones getting access to the help. 1, the financial barrier, so it's free. 2, the physical barrier of what you just said. You don't have to actually do it. I could actually text right now while we're sitting here having this podcast and have a chat to a counsellor. So I don't have to go anywhere for that. And then the 3rd barrier is the social barrier, that it is okay to open up. It is okay to share your story. It is okay to be vulnerable. And I think, by removing those 3 barriers, and then our vision that we're set out to be is to be the mental health support service that people tell their mates about. That's that word of mouth. Yeah. We'd love to be able to turn Google off and people hear about us through a podcast, or people hear about us, because they, saw something on social media, or they heard about it through one of their mates. And that's really the vision and the mission that we're on, to be able to support as many blue collar Australians. And, I get invited to a lot of functions to go to, and often I hate using the term white collar because it's sort of, it's a bit, more corporately. But, when I go and do functions at corporate events, and I recently did one here in Brisbane just recently, and I started off and said, hey, before I start this, I just want to put this into perspective. I just want everyone to think about the food that is around that we're going to eat. A farmer has to produce it. Someone out in rural has to produce it. 2, how does that actually get to us? It's got to be transport. Truckies, rail, logistics, because Australia is so driven by truckies and logistics. And then the last one is I want you to think about the room that we're in, or, the stuff that we call up. We have to ring a service because we've just screwed something up in our house, or the plumber needs to come, is a tradie. So without a farmer, a truckie, or a tradie, or a blue collar worker, this country stops tomorrow.
Yeah, the backbone.
100%. And I think I often get people coming up to me afterwards and going, I've never thought about it that way. And I think often us that may live in the city and, we might be working more corporate jobs, we've got to start to think about, the backbone of this country and, what they're going through. And, the statistics around suicide in Australia is a construction worker takes their own life every second day, and a farmer every 10 days in Australia. And, it's statistics we need to sort of, shift and change. And that's why we're on such a passionate mission, just to start conversations. And, I was at an event just recently out at west of Brisbane, 4.5 hours at a rural event, and we were talking before we came onto this podcast around that whole connection and community. And I went out there and there was about 150 people. It's 4.5 hours in the middle of the bush. There was really no service out there, and I just watched this community come together, and just people were connecting. People didn't have their mobile phones on them. They were having conversations. They were making new friends. And what really just sort of came through to me was there's that, people out there just love having a chat. They might have a beer in their hand and they're having a chat down at the local pub. And when I checked into the hotel out there, out at Condamine, I got out of the ute and I was walking in to check in, and there was a group of 4 people sitting just near the door on a thing, and they all said hello to me.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I don't even know these people, but they're actually saying hello. If we did that anywhere else, people wouldn't be acknowledging us. So I think we've got a lot to learn around those sort of how rural Australia and how blue collar workers, can relate, and how we can get more people talking.
I feel like there's so much I want to break down from the story of TIACS and TradeMutt and yourself, because like the first piece, like going all the way back to the start of that story, where we don't see ourselves as the person in the image with the head down, to really dark image. Maybe it's like rain over a window in front of it. And it's like, well, first, I live in Australia, doesn't rain much. Two, like I'm not really in a position where I break down to that sense. So like it's very hard to relate to things. So then you start pulling off your own challenges because you're like, oh, well, it's not that bad. But then it's like you don't realize that things stack over time. Potentially it can. So early intervention is just as important. So I think being able to break down that stigma, like, no, we actually all have mental health, and let's just have the conversation as a general convo.
Yeah, definitely. And, one of the things is mental health. Some people, I think we've marketed that word as it's a negative word. Yeah. And, for all the blue collar Australians out there that's listening to this podcast and their loved ones, think about this. If I could offer you today 8 free personal training sessions at your local gym, most people would go, hey, that's a bloody good deal. Yeah, I'm getting 8 free PT sessions, which would cost, $70, whatever it is a session. I'm going to get that for free. I'm going to give that a go.
Yeah.
Let's flip that and go, well, I can give everyone today 8 free personal training sessions for their mental fitness at TIACS.
Yeah. How good is that? Like, seeing that perspective change, it just creates that light bulb moment for you, doesn't it? It's like, oh yeah, if it actually was a PT hitting me up, I'd be all over it, like booking 8 weeks in advance.
Totally. You're all across it because we're so focused on our physical health. Yeah. But what we don't realize is our physical health is actually driven by our mental health. And if we can get our mental health right, then it just becomes a flow. And I think that, they play in each other. I talk a lot about self-care, when I'm doing different chats around self-care, because it's so important. What works for you might not work for me, but I find things to be able to manage it. And we get a lot of people reaching out to TIACS, and they sort of frame it in a way going, I've just got a lot of head noise at the moment. I've got all this stuff happening. I might have gone through a relationship breakdown. It could be some struggles at work, could be financial. So everything around mental health often is, unless someone's being diagnosed, is situational. It's a situation that's happened in their life. And we often talk about the fact that in a day, your triggers could change 4 or 5 times in a day around your mental health or your mental well-being, because you could get cut off at the traffic. You could have to sit in traffic and be late for your job. The bill just comes in and you've got to pay that, and you haven't got the funds to be able to do that. And they're all triggers, but the key is how do I manage those triggers? How do I keep on top of it? And, if you haven't got your own self-care routine to be able to manage that, then you need to go talk to someone, and that's when TIACS comes in.
Yeah, then the more you start opening up and start exploring your own mind, then you start asking what's causing the triggers to begin with. Then you can really start regulating yourself so you're not as triggered as much for your time going on in life. Yes, you can't completely just be the perfect person. It's not possible, but you can learn tools, you can learn strategies, so you can just live a more, fulfilled existence, to the sense where we're not triggered all the time. If someone does cut you off in traffic, straight away you're not enraged. Instead, you may be in the perspective of oh, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, no worries. We actually had a guy reach out who's had some anger management issues, and there is a lot being talked about around anger management and DV in the country at the moment. And he reached out for a few sessions with TIACS, and after 2 sessions, after the counsellor had just given him some key strategies and some key things that he could work on, he was back on track. Yeah. He was a different person. And I think often we try to fix the situation ourselves. Males, we're not good at talking, but we try to fix the situation, and often the situation will go down the path of coping mechanisms, whether that's through alcohol, whether that's through drugs, whether that's through violence. And, I think if we feel like we're getting to that point, knowing that it is okay to, tell my story, it is okay to say, hey, I'm not in a good way at the moment. I've got a lot of shit going on at the moment. I just don't know how to navigate my way through it. Yeah. Then we're going to have this, as I said at the start, this ripple effect within the community where we just sort of are being better versions of ourselves for our family, but also our loved one, and actually living life how we should.
Yeah, 100%. And if I'll use an example for myself. So about 9 months ago, I snapped 2 ligaments in my ankle playing futsal. But to be able to recover and heal and be on that journey, I went to a specialist of a physio to help me along the journey of becoming the wellness. It's the exact same thing like speaking to a counselor, social worker, or a therapist. It's like go straight to the professional that can guide you along that journey to wellness.
Yeah, nailed it. I did my shoulder. I had to have shoulder reconstruction nearly 2 years ago at a CrossFit competition, and ended up I got a bolt in here from a bicep tendon because it popped out and got a couple of tears. And one of the things I did, you got to go get it fixed. But then I could have made the decision of going, well, stop working out for 9 months, but I didn't. I'd turn up to the gym in a sling, row, whatever, bike, lifting one-handed barbell weights, all that sort of stuff. And people often used to come to me and go, how can you doing this? Why are you doing this? I said, this is my self-care routine. Yeah. This is managing my mental health. I'm not going to sit back and feel sorry for myself. I'm actually going to turn it around and shift it and actually do something about it. And for 9 months when I was in recovery, I trained 5-6 days a week still. I'd get on the treadmill and run on the treadmill and do those things. And I think for us, it's about if you're in a good space, and there's a terminology, make sure how full's your cup. Yeah. I say to people, if your cup is empty, you can't support others to fill their cup up. So we've actually got to take a bit of selfishness ourselves and go, I'm going to look after myself. I'm going to make sure that I'm in a good place mentally and physically, because if I can then support others to get them into a good space as well.
Yeah, it's so true, because like even selfishness has like a negative aura around it, because I feel like if it is used in the positive sense, one of the most selfless things that we can do is be selfish. So it's like if I'm like, all right, I've got this schedule for this week, I'm going to be training at this specific time. I'm doing that to make sure that it looks after my mental health, because I know it's one of my main strategies with staying on a good path. And everyone else is only going to receive that good version of me because I've got more to give, because I'm giving more to myself.
Totally. Well, a great example was today, doing this podcast now, sort of, I'd be normally probably finishing at the gym, and I went, no, what, I want to do the podcast because it's a great way of creating awareness out there. But for me, it was like, okay, well, I still need to go train. Yeah. So I just switched off at 3:00 this afternoon and went to the gym, did an hour session, and I've done my session, but I still feel good now. Yeah. But if I hadn't even gone, I've got to do this podcast, then I'd be like, this bloody podcast I've got to do. It's just stopped me from going to training. And I actually saw something on LinkedIn only today that a lady posted up and said, when she was working for a big organisation, she was supposed to get to a meeting, and she actually responded and said to the boss, I can't do that meeting because that's getting into my time and my gym time. And the boss went, no worries, that's cool. And I think that's where we're starting to get that step change in it, that it is okay to do the things that are going to make you a better version, because you're going to be a better employee as well.
Yeah, and then you're going to get more out of yourself for that business or for that organisation, which is only going to benefit them as well. But you do have to have times where you look after yourself. Like I'm sure we've all, or most of us, let's just probably speak between me and you here, but we've had moments where we're like, maybe I can't go in today. I just need a day to reset and rejuvenate myself. Like I've had times where I've had like a big day at work because I do a 9 to 5. I'll come home, I'm like, I've got a podcast tonight. Now I'm like, you know what, I really need to reschedule. Like I don't want to come home, do a podcast half scattered, and then after it, regret doing it because I didn't give my all and there wasn't a great conversation from my perspective. And that just feeds even more. So sometimes you really have to be like, you know what, I've got to put myself first here.
Yeah. Oh, I had an example. I was going through a bit of a rough time, mainly, and it wasn't work. It was actually, we have lots of conversations about mental health and suicide, and we can go to a function and have 3 or 4 conversations with people that have lost their loved ones, and the reason why they come up and share that story that they might not with someone else, because they know that we're in the space, so they feel comfortable that they can share their story, and that takes a toll. I've sat on a plane on the way back from Sydney one day after having 5 conversations in a short period of time with people that had, been impacted by suicide. One from a 10-year-old that took their own life at 10 years of age, right up to a CEO of an organisation. And I got on the plane and I was just sort of trying to process that. And as much as you don't become desensitized to that, you still got to take on that emotion. And so I reached out to Dan and Ed, who are our co-founders at TradeMutt and TIACS, and said to the boys, hey, I need to take a day out, but can I come over and pick some stock at the TradeMutt warehouse? And they're like going, are you crazy? Like, you want to take day out, but you're going to come and work at the TradeMutt? And I said, if I just go and take a day off and go to the beach or go get a massage or whatever that is, I won't switch off.
Yeah.
But if I come into the TradeMutt warehouse, I can put, you know, the headphones in. I can listen to a podcast. I can listen to music. I can learn a new skill because I've never done picked any orders at TradeMutt before, and I won't be looking at my phone.
Yeah.
And that day I went in there, I learned how to pick the orders, process the orders, pack them up, ready for it to be sent out. And I did that from start to finish. And I got in the car on the way home and I felt so refreshed. I felt like all that head noise that I may have had was gone because I focused on everything else other than thinking about that. Whereas if I'd actually had a day just to myself, I would have still gone through the process of running that through your mind. So I think
stuck in your head noise.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's where people out there have got this opportunity to go, when you feel like that, go and try something new. Go and do something different that's just going to get your mind off what you're actually doing. Go learn a new skill. Go start doing some boxing or, go to the gym or do whatever it is just to get rid of that head noise that may be experiencing, and you get to learn a new skill along the way.
And I find, like, over the years of my work, I found one of the common things why people start feeling not as purposeful and they start to feel depressed is because they feel like they've been in the same pattern for too long and it's not fulfilling them. So by going out and learning something new or doing something new or doing some sort of adventure, because I know you've done Kokoda 9 times as well.
Yep.
Yeah, so like by doing things like just some sort of exploration or adventure can bring a new spark into your life, which can then feed new ideas into your mind, meet new people. Like, you never know what can happen by just going out there, learning something new or doing something new.
Yeah, and Kokoda was a real interesting experience for me because it was when my sister reached out to me and said, hey, we're doing Kokoda next year. And this was back in 2012. And 2011, we were going to do it in 2012. And she said, do you want to do it? And I wasn't really that fit. And, I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this, I want to be the fittest version of myself.
And just before, like, for the listeners, for context, like, what is Kokoda? Because for someone that's not as fit to then go and do Kokoda.
Yeah, like so Kokoda is, the Kokoda Trail is over in Papua New Guinea through the jungle. It's over sort of anywhere from 6 days to 9 days. There's about 7,000 metres of elevation, 7,000 metres of de-elevation. It's in the jungle. It's where in 1942 where the Australians fought off the Japanese over there, and we follow the same trek as what the Australians did and learn the history along the way. It's sort of like a bit of a bucket list thing for people. If they're looking at, some people have Everest and Kilimanjaro and those sorts of treks, and Kokoda for me was my dad served in Vietnam, my grandfather served in PNG with the Air Force, so having that opportunity to go and walk the track, and she reached out to me and I went on this massive fitness thing. Like, I needed about 3 or 4 months to get fit, and I just smashed it out, and lost lots of weight, got really fit. But for me, it was actually getting there. Even though I got myself to the fittest version I probably had been in my whole life, I turned 40 that year as well, and for me it was like this is so good. Like, and then when I did the trek, it was actually because I'd physically fit. What it became was a mental challenge, and I learned a lot about myself mentally doing the trek, because you're pushed right out of your comfort zone and you're trying 9 days. 9 days, living out of a tent, living off 2-minute noodles, no showers, that sort of stuff. You're really out of the elements. And after that, after I did it the first one, I just got a taste for it and ended up becoming a trek leader for an organisation, and then did subsequent treks as a trek leader post that as well. And I used to use those 10 days that I was over there for as my mental health week a year. Nice. Yeah. Because when you're over there in the jungle, you got no access to any Wi-Fi. You got no service. You got a satellite phone. So for the 9 days that we're on the track, you are basically it. Yeah. And all you get to an opportunity to do is meet new people, the new trackers that are coming through. And I haven't done it for a few years. I've had to sort of disconnect since starting with TIACS, because that's where my passion and my focus is. But they're experiences that I'll never be able to take out of my mind. And since then have been able to continue to maintain a physical fitness as well as a mental fitness, since then. But it was really that 2012 was really a changing point in my life.
Yeah, well, like, what part do you think nature played in that? Like, just being out in nature for that longer time?
Oh, mate, fresh air, like grounding. And it's really it's a really interesting point, because when you fly back into Brisbane, and all of a sudden there's just concrete buildings, roads, traffic, the pollution. It's just a different world. And one thing that I learned going and doing Kokoda was you get to villages along the way, and these villages have no power.
Yeah.
They're living off the land, and you're seeing kids making toys out of remnants of whatever they've got, pieces of timber and stuff like that. There's no flash toys.
Yeah.
There's no iPads. The clothes are hand me down from the older kids to the younger kids. There's no new clothes out there, and if it is, it's sort of the fake rugby league jerseys and stuff like that they're wearing. But it's just really grounding, and to get up every morning and to go and swim in a fresh creek that's unpolluted and it's just cold, fresh. To drink fresh water out of creeks. It's just an amazing experience.
And experience, eh?
Totally, and it's game changing, and where it was really game changing for me was on my first trek that I did as a trekker. You get a little bit of service about 2 days out, and mobile phone service, and I'd actually text my kids, and my daughter was she would have been 15, I think, at the time, or 14 or 15 at the time, and I messaged her and just sort of said, hey, this is where I'm at, we'll be home in a couple of days. And I didn't get we lost service. We went down into a bit of a lull in the hill, and then we sort of, the next couple of days, we came up the peak again when we got service again. And when we got that service at the top, it was my daughter. She had sent me a text back from that message. Yeah. And it was, Dad, I'm so proud of you.
Wow, how good.
I absolutely bawled my eyes out for the next 3 hours walking down that hill, because the whole emotion of on a trek for 8-9 days, physically and mentally, but then to have one of your kids turn around and say, I'm so proud of you, I'll never forget that.
Like, as a dad, like, what does that mean to you?
Oh, so much, so much. Like, and I'd gone through a divorce in 2007. So, my kids, I had the kids half the time, and my ex-wife had the kids for the other half of the time, and completely amicable relationship. And we always wanted to do the best for the kids. But to have your kid turn around at 15 years of age and turn around and say, I'm so proud of you, it's a special moment.
You genuinely mean it too.
Yeah, I'm welling up now a little bit, because I still remember at the top of that hill getting that message, and then putting my sunglasses on for the rest of the time down, because I just had tears just coming down my face. And I think it was just a whole heap of emotion of being in the jungle for 9 days, physically sweating. My belt was getting smaller and smaller, because you lose a bit of weight and a lot of fluid being out there for 9 days, because you're not eating as much, you're not getting the protein that you need. But yeah, life-changing experience. But it's an experience that, then taught me how to manage my mental health a lot better too.
Yeah, and like being able to go and do that the first time, like, started with having the goal of, I need to get fit, but the reason you had the goal to get fit was because you had something at the end of it that you needed to get fit for. So I feel like having goals in life is important as well. And like, it doesn't have to be like this big goal where I want $1 billion house. It can be something like, I want to make my kids proud, like that moment for you. And then becoming the version of yourself that you're proud of, which then your kids will see that as a reflection as well. Yeah,
and even if, as you say, even if it's just the smallest of goals, you know what, I want to run 5Ks. Yeah. And work towards that over, in 6 months' time, you might have never run before, but you want to go run. Or, you want to go and you start boxing, or you start any sort of that, you want to get to a first competition. For me, it was doing CrossFit was, I want to be able to do CrossFit at an RX level, so at a sort of a good level. And, you just keep on working at it and chip away, and you end up, as you say, you become a better version of yourself. And I think we've got to flip this whole materialistic thing. Like, create experiences, because the experiences you can never take away.
No, you've always got them. Especially now, like, you got them visually in your mind, but now we've got phones and cameras to actually capture the moments too. Like, that's why I love traveling. I love going out there, even if it's not like a big trip overseas. Like, me and my partner just go to Hinterlands and Sunny Coast for a day. Like, little things like that, just being able to go and explore and adventure and create memories between you two.
Yeah, and often, when was the last time you did a date night?
Yeah.
Like, when was the last time when did you go out for a date? Like, that's the question everyone asks themselves.
Probably a couple of nights ago.
Yep.
Making sure it is a routine, Because I feel like if you don't schedule things into a sense, like either in your own mind or check in with yourself, you do lose track of things, don't you?
Totally. And those experiences, creating experiences, like often we're such in a materialistic world when it comes to Christmases and birthdays or whatever like that. We feel like we've got to give something physical to somebody when wouldn't you be better off giving them an experience to be able to create an experience? And, I use the example of, one year a mate of mine gave his son, a football. And the son was like, what's the football for? But what it was for so that dad and his son could go out and kick the football and create an experience,
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And that's where I think we've got to start to change how we look at things. And, it's not what we actually have physically, it's actually what we've got around us and in our minds is what's really the powerful thing.
I love how you touched on getting the footy too, because like if someone thinks like I want to create an experience with someone, the probably like, if I get tickets for Aussie World, I'll need to get 4 of them, maybe a bit too expensive. But it's like you can just grab a footy or even grab a frisbee or anything just so people can have an experience together. Yeah,
well, Ed, one of our co-founders, did a blog once. Would have been probably about 18 months ago now, and it was about how a $20 basketball pretty much didn't save his marriage, but actually, created a really fruitful marriage for him. And what it was all of a sudden they'd take the $20 basketball down to the two of them. His wife would go down and just shoot some hoops together, and they'd walk down. They'd have a chat on the way down, shoot some hoops, have a bit of fun, and then walk back.
Yeah, how good is
a
that?
$20 basketball.
Yeah,
something as simple as that can just create such an experience and put us into have a better relationship with our loved ones.
100%. Like even on like Facebook Marketplace, you can get free stuff because me and my wife, we end up going to Marketplace, got 2 bikes for free, like push bikes, and that would just ride around the estate like on Sunset.
Yeah,
it's like, well, we got those bikes for free. And it's like that gives us that experience, a connection.
Yeah. One of the things my wife and I do, I've got a bulldog, which I just showed you. Great to have another bulldog lover out there.
Of course.
But we take ours for, every afternoon where we can, we just take him for a walk. And that whole time we're having a chat about each other's day. So we're not waiting till we get home to the dinner table or whatever. We're actually spending that time, what happened with your day, what happened with mine, and just talking about, what plans we've got coming up. And the simple thing of just putting the leash on the dog and taking it for a walk is another way to connect.
Yeah, and actually having the opportunity to like actually listen to what someone else is saying as well, because sometimes we can be in conversation to reply, but I feel like if you give yourself space to actually listen, absorb and hear that person, like you can just create a deeper bond because you don't feel like you're cutting each other off. Because I know with me in the past, I used to be someone that as soon as someone would finish speaking, I'd always jump in and start talking. Yep. I had to reflect within myself, like, why am I doing that?
and if we've got a phone around, you're so tempted to go to the phone, where if you're walking, we just leave our phones at home. Like we don't need them. Nothing's going to happen between that 30 minutes that we're sort of out and about and we're coming back in. But I think we live in such a society now that we're so driven by these mobile phones and being connected, and we're going to miss out on something. And if someone's going to like my post or not like my post, we've just got to get rid of that. And I think if we are, we're going to have a better connection with our loved ones.
Yeah, and that's why I love like the 1% rule, like you don't have to do everything by tomorrow or have everything by next week. It's like do the little things over time and watch it stack. Like for someone who is battling depression, one of their big goals could just be make sure you shower daily. Little things like that. But then once you start showering daily, like you may be like, all right, I'll start eating breakfast now. Yeah. And once you start getting showering breakfast down pat, you're like, I might actually go get some sunlight in the morning as well. But it's just habit stacking. Over time, these things do stack, but it's not getting too many things on your plate at once and bloat yourself and be too full. It's like, no, just start winning yourself into it and you'll see the results.
Totally. I think, that whole thing around those little things, even just going out and ripping your shoes off and getting a bit of grounding and standing in the sun, as you say, at the start of the day, just getting that started. Like, I'm in a routine now where I ended up buying a sauna for home and just an infrared sauna and set up an ice bath. And every morning when I'm not traveling, 25 minutes in the sauna, 3 minutes in the ice bath, and it sets my day up. Yeah. And now it's just become a discipline. Yeah. Where every day it's just routine. Go sleep the sauna on, go do a few things, go jump in it, jump out, get in the ice bath, and I'm off to work. And I'm just refreshed and started for the day. But it took me little baby steps to get to that point.
Yeah, and start getting yourself to a point where it is a habit as well. Because I've got an ice bath too, and I think you'll agree with me with this. at the start, your body gets like that parasympathetic nervous system where it goes in fight or flight and you want to get out. But I feel like it doesn't really get easy in the sense of the temperature, but it gets easy in the sense where as soon as you get in, your breath's already controlled, not in fight or flight. And I feel like the extension of that adds so many benefits to your life when we're talking about before the triggers within us. I feel like the ice bath for me, if I do it consistently, I'm less triggered in life because my nervous system is more regulated.
Totally. I was actually only thinking about it this morning. I jumped in it this morning for my 3 minutes, and I got in there and I thought, I've been doing it for a while now, and I just go, this is just like, it's just easy. Yeah. Like I just get in, control my breathing, close my eyes, think about the day ahead, and then just sort of and then I get out and the body just feels so refreshed.
Like a burst.
And it is. It's just like this energy kick that's just been hit into
like the ultimate shower.
But then, and I know that doesn't work for some people, and some people will come around and can't even last like 30 seconds in it. But, again, get in there for 20 seconds. Yeah. Next day, get in there for 40 seconds, until you got to a point where you're in there for 3 minutes, like it's, as you say, it's just gradual. You don't have to kick it out of the park just in that first one hit. But, for me, that's habit and routine now.
Yeah, because I feel like, especially in gyms as well, people can have like the anxiety of getting into a gym because it can be confronting. You walk in there and you have the idea of people may be looking at you, people may be super fit there, and you can kind of get caught in your own mind. But I know when I first joined the gym, the main thing for me was just get in there. Like you don't have to go in there and do like an hour workout. Like just go in there, walk on the treadmill until you feel comfortable getting on the assault bike. And then once you do the assault bike, then maybe you're more comfortable to do chest press and just like slowly work your way up. But it's just got to start by walking through the door.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, once you get used to that, one of the things that we do when we travel, we do drop-ins. So we do drop-in to gyms and CrossFit gyms around the world. I've been to many CrossFit gyms around the world when I've travelled because I just turn up. And I went to Sweden a few years ago now and dropped into a CrossFit box over there, and they actually said we'll actually do the class in English because they were because I was there and I didn't understand what they were saying. But again, it breaks out those barriers that you have, that it's okay to walk in, you meet new people. And I think the power of that mental well-being and that getting that mental well-being into a place is meeting new people and having connections. Yeah. And you'd be surprised the amount of people that have probably gone through similar stuff that you're going through. But they want that connection as well.
Yeah, 100%.
So, just getting out in that environment and whether it's at a gym or, wherever it is, making new connections with people is such a key thing for your mental well-being.
Because I feel like it's only within the new age where we've become more separated and so like less social in community groups, because growing up for thousands of years, we've always been in tribes and communities and villages. But then as the time has gone on, we've been a bit more isolated and separate. But then I feel like that plays such a role in our mental health as well. So I feel like what you're saying there, by going to spaces where you meet new people, meet communities, get around people, can be such a bonus towards feeling good and your whole wellness.
Totally. And recently, we saw this thing, there's a pickleball craze. I don't know if you've heard of pickleball. Yeah, there's definitely a pickleball craze happening around the world. Fastest growing US sport in the US at the moment is pickleball. And we saw it and we just went, let's reach out. And my wife and I reached out to the local pickleball club, and we go down there every Sunday afternoon for an hour and a half and, play pickleball against, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds or, 18-year-olds. And you're just meeting new people, but, there's no sort of status. You just go there for a social game, but you're actually getting physical exercise, you're meeting new people and you're trying something new.
Yeah.
What a bonus.
And it's like another thing, it's like to break up the week as well, like do something different from work. Maybe do something different from just the responsibilities that we have in life, and have some time where you can do something fun. I feel like as we grow up, we can forget to have fun sometimes.
Well, we do. We get so into the day-to-day, as I think you mentioned before, especially for blue-collar workers that, are working that, on the tools at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning and might not finish till 5, 6 o'clock at night. And, even think about, truckies out there that are doing long haul. They're out and there for 6, 7 days straight, driving for 14 hours a day. And, recently I had a chat with a truck driver and he said the only person he spoke to in the week was when he was filling up the truck with fuel and getting his takeaway food and filling up. That's the only person he spoke to outside of, human connection, other than talking to his family on the phone. That was the only time he had that. So, we've got to think about those people that are doing those longer hours of how do we give them the support that they need, because they might not have the opportunity like us to, go to the gym or, and, one of the things we sort of promote is, even if it's just down at the local pub, as much as what we're a mental health organisation, we promote and responsible drinking, but having a chat with a mate over a beer, it could be anything, that it could make all the difference for them for their week going into the weekend.
100%, like especially in blue collar, because when I was a chippy, like one of our ways to bond after work was to go to the pub and have a couple of beers and like have a chicken palmy. Like that was just the thing. Like having those conversations there, I feel like is a great start as well, because that's where a lot of the blue collar workers do just go to socialise.
Yeah, and one of the things that Dan and Ed did with TradeMutt, they launched the initiative called, Funky Shirt Friday. And, they say, wear a funky shirt on a Friday to start conversations. And there's no better day to have a conversation than a Friday. And, leading into the weekend as well, because, there could be people out there that, are working on the tools, Monday to Friday, and they've got work colleagues to talk to, but then on the weekend, they might be going home to isolation.
Yeah.
And, if they can sort of get that conversation going in before the weekend and, get them in a really good frame of mind, that power of that shirt could make all the difference. So, making sure that we just continue to check in with our mates as well when you see them going through, you mentioned before around, having a bath and having a shower and doing your hair, they're some of the first things that people stop doing when they're going through challenges, because they don't care about themselves.
100%. And that's like, especially like the shirt as well, like Funky Friday, but just overall with TradeMutt, the reason why I love the shirt as well, because it does spark the conversation in person, but also for someone that may not approach you, they may just see the shirt in the distance, like, oh, what is that shirt? Where's that shirt from? Go on Google and just type in colourful tradie shirt. Then it will come up just through keywords, and then you get straight into the website and they see TIACS, see TradeMutt. So just by seeing the thing visually, start a conversation with themselves.
Totally. Well, we had a lady at an expo just recently, and we had the lineup of all the shirts all on a rack. And she came up and she said, I'm suffering anxiety and going through some challenges at the moment. Is it okay if I just stand here and look at the shirts? And I said, yeah. She said, it just makes me feel good. The bright colours.
Yeah, well.
Something as simple as that. Like we just don't think, if we're not in that situation. And often we try to put ourselves in that individual situation, we actually don't know what they're going through.
Yeah, that's the thing too, isn't it? Like we don't ever really know, because I know with mental health, when we do hear about someone passing or we hear about someone going through challenges, sometimes people say like, oh, I didn't know, like it's always the person you least expect. That's what people say. And you just never know what people are going through. So I think if we show more kindness to the people around us and be more open to them to have that piece for a conversation starter, like where we can. But now I'm thinking about it, it also comes down to like just every single person having general information or general knowledge on mental health, and how to respond to someone when they do open up to them as well. Because one of my mates said to me, because I've worked in the mental health space for about 6 years now, he said to me, if someone opened up to me, I wouldn't know what to say, like I'd freeze.
Yeah.
And I'm like that's completely normal, because you didn't grow up through school, you didn't grow up through anyone around you teaching you on how to respond to that. And it started making me think, like, how can we create the conversation to a point where people know how to respond to mental health? So do you have anything on that? Or
yeah, well, actually, I had this conversation with on a Teams call today with somebody that reached out to TIACS and sort of said, is there do you guys have any training programs out there? And I said, you know what? I said, you can go to as many training programs as you want. And, it's great when people go and get, mental health first aid to be able to, triage that. But one of the things is we just got to be good listeners. We just got to become good listeners.
Yeah.
And never put ourselves in their shoes, but to listen, to ask questions along the way, continue to check in, because you can go off and do all the training that you need. But when you get to that situation, every situation is completely different. And I think the other thing is making sure that you put in your toolkit for listeners out there is to be able to go, well, what are these professional services out there like TIACS and, like Beyond Blue and all the other out there? What are those services offering? So when you do get in that situation where someone is struggling, you might not be able to, give them the advice that you think you need to give them, but you might be able to give them a referral to get the advice that they need. And I think that's where it becomes critical. And we encourage everybody out there, if you haven't heard about TIACS, get over to tiacs.org, get the phone number, and just ring our service, even if you don't need us. Because once you understand how easy it is to get access, you're going to be better off referring that on to others that may be going through a rough time.
100%. And this gives yourself more awareness of what things are out there as well. And I love your answer as well, because like, I feel like a lot of us feel like we have to give advice. We have to quote unquote fix someone. But the main thing is just listen and give them a space to speak and be heard.
I get this, and you probably get it the same as well, is that what happens if I say the wrong thing?
Yeah.
All the time. We get it all the time. And it's like, you're never going to say the wrong thing. You know, that probably the toughest thing you're ever going to have to say to someone back, if you feel that they're really struggling, is, are you in a safe place right now?
Yeah.
And if you can ask that question, that'll put it back to that individual going, oh, they'll either go, oh no, I'm okay, I'm all good. Okay, cool. Then you know where to go. But if they turn around and go, no, I'm not in a safe place, don't leave them. Get onto some help ASAP and get people out there. But often that'll be the toughest question you'll ever have to ask an individual that may be going through it. And I've actually asked that of a family member before. Yeah. And it was a real tough thing. I said, are you in a safe place right now? And they said, yeah, I'm okay, I'm good. Okay, cool. So I think often we think that we're going to say something that's going to probably put them down a path where potentially they could harm themselves.
We might trigger them.
Yeah, or trigger them. The stats and the data and everything out there has proven that whatever you say isn't going to have an impact. If somebody is going down that path of harming themselves, what you say, they would have already made that decision a little while ago. So the best thing you can do is to listen. You know, keep checking in with them. Notice the signs when you start to see somebody, you know, turn up for work that hasn't showered for a few days, or, you know, becomes quite irritable. You know, all those signs that show that someone is going through some challenges, and they might not feel comfortable about talking about it then, but they'll eventually get to a point and feel that you're showing them so much support that they feel that they'll need to talk to you about it. And we talk a lot about that word vulnerability. And I had this example where, and I say this all the time when I do any keynotes, because I think it just really sort of brings this vulnerability word into play. And I had the opportunity to present to a board here in Queensland. They were looking at doing some funding for TIACS, and there was 8 people on the board, and the CEO said to me before I turned up, you got 15 minutes to present around TradeMutt TIACS, essentially TIACS. And I said, no worries, 15 minutes is fine. And, you know, after I shared a bit of my personal story about growing up with an old man who served in Vietnam with PTSD, and then shared Dan and Ed's story, I then had one of the guys just in the board just open up and talk about how he had lost a family member to suicide. Yeah. And he shared his story. And then after he finished sharing his story, the board member who was sitting right next to him said, can I let you know about how I was impacted? And he said, I turned up, my house was getting renovated, and I turned up one day and the Sparky didn't turn up because the Sparky had taken his own life the night before. Wow. I went, holy shit, this is 2 out of 8 people that have been impacted. After he finished sharing his story, the oldest board member in the room would have been in his mid-60s. He piped up and said, when I was a young fella, my grandfather took his own life. And I was blown away by 8 people in the room, and 3 of them had a story. When I walked out, the CEO grabbed me, put his arm on my shoulder and said, mate, and this was an hour and 15 minutes after. It was an hour after I had in time allocation. But he stopped me and he said, I've known those guys for 15 years. We've travelled together. We've gone to conferences, board meetings, and I've never heard those stories. And I just turned around to him and I said, mate, it's the power of vulnerability. I was vulnerable enough to share my story, Dan and Ed's story. I also created a space where there was no judgment and people could share their own. Yeah. And as soon as you get the opportunity to share your story, you're creating a space for others in that room that feel comfortable enough that you've been vulnerable enough, they'll be vulnerable enough. And I think that's how we're going to get change in this community around mental health and people opening up, because how can I expect someone else to reach out to a service like TIACS or be the change if I'm not going to be the change myself?
Yeah. That's to start with you.
That's 100%. Yeah. Totally.
100%. And like for the people listening as well, like if they want to reach out to TIACS, what's usually some of the best ways to get involved or get in contact?
Yeah, pretty much we direct everybody to the website, tiacs.org, and the phone number's there. There's other means of getting in contact with us through socials as well. But definitely, use a text or call. is easy. If you know somebody and you're listening there now, and you know yourself, you're struggling yourself, and you know you might not have the courage to open up now, but you know, get onto TIACS, save that phone number in your phone, and you know you might use that at some stage. You know, get on board with TradeMutt. You know, check them out. You know, it's a social enterprise, so you know that money is going back into having a social impact, and you might start a few conversations along the way. So definitely, I think that. And then if you know somebody, a loved one is struggling, you know, feel comfortable that you can share your story, but also share the number to get access to TIACS. And you know, our team of counsellors are there waiting for that. And you know, when we talk about, and you mentioned earlier, you know, about early intervention. Think about us as that if you need a tune-up, like we tune up our car and it needs to go in for a service, sometimes our mind needs to go in for a service. So just reach out, get the service, get your mind serviced. And if you need to come back in 12 months' time and get another service again, you know, because you've clicked over. But also if you feel like you've got some tough times ahead, so you can see the road ahead is going to be a challenge, then reach out to TIACS and try to get on the front foot. It's like if you're going into any sort of physical competition, you don't wait till you're at the competition to go, I need to get physically fit. You work on it now, and your mind, we need to get people encouraged that the mind it works the same way. I need to get my mind fit because I know that I might be going through a relationship breakup. I might be, you know, going through some financial issues. And, you know, the number one reason why a male reaches out to TIACS is relationship.
I love that as well. Like, you treat it like a fight camp. Like, if you see something coming on the horizon, like, what better way to discuss it before it comes into your life and you start experiencing it? And that way you can kind of just process how you feel around the thing before it even comes. Yeah,
definitely. And, you know, with all the listeners out there that you've got listening to your podcast, think about 1 in 4 of those are going through a mental health challenge right now.
Yeah.
So people are out there listening, going through some challenges right now, might be able to navigate it, but they might not. And when they don't, reach out to a service like TIACS, or reach out to any service, or just reach out to your mate. Check in and go, you know what, mate, I'm really struggling. It is okay to break down. It is okay to shed a tear, you know, because you're going to be a better person for yourself.
And if you want that change in your life, like you said, you know, it's got to start with you, be that change. So if you, within your like social circle or within your work environment, if you're on the tools and you've got like a crew of 4 people, maybe you can go to work and start the conversation. Be like, lads, if anyone needs to talk, I'm here. If anyone wants to open up, I'm here. And just put it out there one morning randomly in front of everyone. People may laugh you off and whatnot in the moment, but that's going to stick with them. And they're actually going to take it true, like serious. And then one day they actually might come to you and open up and start that conversation. But I feel like to begin with, you got to start with it.
Yeah, we often do we'll do toolbox talks at, you know, construction sites and, you know, trucking companies and stuff like that. And often they'll reach out and say, hey, can you come and talk about mental health? And I go, I'm not going to come and talk about mental health. I'm going to come and talk about TradeMutt, the TIACS story, and how people can get access. Because if there's 50 people in front of me, I know that there are at least 10 of them that are going through some challenges. They don't want to hear about mental health. They don't want to hear about that, you know, I need to drink more water and I need to, you know, eat more fruit and veggies and all that sort of stuff, do ice baths. All they want to know is who do I talk to and how do I get help? And that's why we do what we do. And I can guarantee you every single time we do a chat, there'll be at least 1 or 2 people waiting to come up and talk to us, either to tell their story or go, oh, okay, I need help. How do I get it?
Awesome, man. So I want to say, Jason, thank you for coming on the podcast. I'm a massive fan of TradeMutt, massive fan of TIACS, supporting the mission, big advocate. I'm going to be pushing the message more for myself, and I hope this podcast gets out there and reaches a lot of people to get the name of TIACS and TradeMutt out there, so these conversations can just become just a general conversation in people's lives. Thanks.
Mate, appreciate the time and appreciate the awareness to get out there around TradeMutt and TIACS, and you can get on and support us through just creating awareness about our service. Jump on board with TradeMutt and support Funky Shirt Friday, and let's have that ripple effect out in the community.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.